Hello, hello, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. My name is Javier Ramos. This session is Spanish, the language of cultures, and we are going to give a couple of minutes mm, for people to arrive to this room, right? I'm speaking to you from Edinburgh, where I am based. Um, where are you? What's your location? If you want to share your location, you can use the chat box. I am sure we have people from very different places in the UK and also beyond. I see people from Luxembourg. Welcome, everyone. We're just giving a little bit of time for people to get into the room, as I know that there have been other sessions just before this one. Right? Okay, people from Dundee. Hello, Carmen. Uh, yeah, and I see people are joining step by step. Welcome, everyone. Okay, people from London, but have been living in Spain for a long time. Colombiana in Inglaterra, welcome also. All right, so let's start. As I said, well, welcome to everyone. Welcome and thank you very much for joining us in this session, Spanish, a language of cultures. My name is Javier Ramos Linares, and I am Education Advisor at the Spanish Embassy Education Office, the Consejería de Educación. And on behalf of my organization, I would like to thank the organizers of our language show for inviting us to take part in this event where we are celebrating languages all this weekend. Before start, I would like to share with you some practical information about how we are running this talk. It will take like 40 or 45 minutes. As you know, this session, the whole sessions of the language show, is being recorded, so you will be able to watch it again afterwards. If you want a copy of the slides and you are now in live, you can go to the resources in the top or bottom bar, open the resources, and then if you click on documents, you have the PDF slides that you can download. If you are watching the recorded session, you can always email us. I'm going to share with you our contact details, asking for the slides, and we will send them to you. Remember, we also have a space in the virtual exhibition today and tomorrow, from Friday, in fact, until tomorrow. So you can visit us in the marketplace. And of course, you can always visit our website and follow our social media. I'm going to share with you our contact details. Let me share my screen with you. Uh, that's it. That's it. Yeah, I'm sharing my screen. Please confirm through the chat box if you can see my screen so that I can. That's okay. Yeah, I see your reactions. Okay, that's perfect. Thank you. Okay. Um. All right. So let's have a look at some of the questions that we will try to answer during this talk. You see the slides with the questions. What's the language that has given the biggest amount of words of Spanish, besides Latin, of course? Are there international words in Spanish and words in other languages, including English, that have been brought from Spanish? Is there any difference in the pronunciation between B and V in Spanish? Or why Spanish doesn't have any combination of letters such as RH or TH or PH, no? Or double S, for example? Uh, let's start with the first question that you have here in the slides. Do you have any idea of how many words there are in Spanish? It's a tricky question. Well, the number depends a little bit on where you look at. If you go to the main reference, which is the Diccionario de la Lengua Española, Dictionary of Spanish Language by the Spanish Royal Academy, the RAE, we find that it contains some 93,000 words. But we know that a dictionary of this kind does not include all the words that are used. No, in fact, the words go through a filter before being accepted by the academy. The use, for example, must be extended and consolidated. So specialists' calculation established that there are at least 30% more words than those that appear in dictionaries, which would increase the number of words in Spanish to 120,000 words. And that's a lot of words, isn't it? The truth is that we as speakers use far fewer, no? Around 20,000 words actively and another 20,000 words passively. That is to say, words that we understand, but we don't integrate in our speech. But even 40,000 words, that's a lot of words, especially for a learner of Spanish. We know that the lexical competence to be achieved by a student is graded depending on the levels, no? As you can see in this slide, no? For absolute beginners, 100 words, intermediate level, from 1,500 words to 4,000 words, and then advanced level around 5,000 words, which is a number well below the 20,000 words actively used by a native speaker. In any case, it is still a lot of words, but fortunately, when we learn Spanish or when we learn any other language, we have a series of resources, mechanisms, and strategies that facilitate access to the lexicon. No? We will try to highlight some of these strategies throughout this talk. A while ago, I was asking you the number of words in Spanish, and now I would like to bring another question. Do you know how many languages there are in the world? Well, the number is not exact. It is estimated that there are 7,000 languages in the world, and most of them, 2/3 or so, are on the African and Asian continents. Many of these languages have very few speakers, and some have very, very few. So it is calculated that 700 languages have less than 150 speakers. No? In contrast, there are other languages that are widely spoken, and in this respect, the Indo-European languages family is very large, no? As 46% of the world inhabitants speak a language belonging to this family. When we refer to Indo-European languages, this is a concept created by linguists in the 19th century, which is used to identify the linguistic families that have been related for 3,000 years and have marked the history of the European continent, as we have 4 main branches of these families: Celtic, Italic, Germanic, and Slavic. There are few languages in Europe that do not belong to this Indo-European family. Finnish, for example, Hungarian, Estonian, and Lapis languages, and also in Spain, Basque language. You know, the origin of these languages remains unknown. But in any case, the languages of Europe have been in contact and influenced each other throughout history, and this fact has enormous consequences for how they are shaped today. No? In fact, this contact and mutual influence is a factor that today makes easier for speakers of one European language to learn another European language, more or less easily, depending on the degree of mutual influence. We consider the case of English, for example. English, what kind of language is it? A Germanic language, no? As you know, in the British Isles, the dialects of Old English, which belong to this Germanic family, coexisted with 2 major Celtic dialects, Welsh and Gaelic, which is still alive in present day in Scotland and Ireland. French also came to the islands and became the language of the court for 3 centuries. During this time, the influence of French on Anglo-Saxon was so profound that if we consider only the lexicon, the words, it would be difficult to say whether modern English is a Germanic or Romance language. This fact is very relevant for English-speaking students learning a Romance language, be it French or Spanish, since there is a very important part of the lexical stock with a common origin. A clear example of this are the cognates. No? Do you know what cognates are? Cognates are words that are share similar meaning, spelling, and sometimes also pronunciation in two different languages. It is estimated that 30 to 40% of all English words have a correlate in Spanish. Imagine 30 to 40%. In this contact between languages, it is very common for one language to borrow terms from another, no? For communication needs, to give names to new concepts, and so on. No? We also know that some of these borrowed words are internationally successful and become part of the vocabulary of many languages. And in an age of global communication as the one we are living, it is logical that these international words have increased enormously. A domain where these international words are very frequent is the field of food and cooking, which is logical if we take into account the internationalization of some dishes. No? Someone with little knowledge of Spanish will not have much difficulty to understand the menu of a restaurant, let's say, for example, in Malaga, which includes some of the dishes that you have here on this slide. No? But let's go back to another of the questions we included in our first slide. Do you know where the Spanish word comes from? Spanish, as you know, is indeed a Romance language, no? Coming from Latin, like French, Portuguese, Italian, Romanian, Catalan, etc. No? However, the history of the Spanish language is marked by its contact with other languages and cultures, which have provided Spanish with a large number of expressions and words, proving this history of coexistence. Within the history, there are several particularly decisive events that explain the present day shape of Spanish. You have some dates here, that's some years here. 218 before Christ, that's the year where the Romans set foot on the Spanish peninsula for the first time. Also, they took their time for the conquest, which did not culminate until 2 centuries later, in 19 before Christ. But in that year, 218, the coexistence of Latin with the pre-Roman languages began, and that's very important, as we are going to see now. Then we have 711, that's the year of the arrival of the first Arabs to the peninsula. 1492 is a very important year for Spain and for the history of the Spanish language, especially because that was the year where Spanish began to be exported to the American continent. And 1810 was the year where the independence of the American republics began, and they decided to adopt Spanish as official language in all of them. No? So, and this fact has been decisive for the current international weight of Spanish. We know that the origin of Spanish words is mainly Latin. Also, there are some other languages, many other languages, in fact, that are also present in the Spanish lexicon. You have them here: French, Amerindian languages, in particular Nahuatl, spoken in Mexico, Iberian Romance languages, English, pre-Roman languages, and Arabic. Let's take a look at all of these influences, but we can already say that Arabic has special relevance, as it is estimated that 8% of the Spanish vocabulary comes from this origin. Right, you have here the map of the peninsula. When the Romans arrived, they found languages such as Basque, Iberian, Celto-Iberian, and other Celtic languages belonging to the same family as Welsh and Gaelic and Cornish, the disappeared Cornish. With the exception of Basque, all these languages, these pre-Roman languages, gradually disappear because the speakers found a better option in the Latin that had arrived. But however, this disappearance does not mean the complete erasure of these languages. In fact, the underlying influence of these pre-Roman languages on the Latin of the Iberian Peninsula made it to evolve in a different way, and today's Spanish has distinctive features in comparison with some of the Roman languages, such as French or Italian, which can be explained by its contact with these pre-Roman languages. Let's see for an example. You see these words in the slide. If you compare the evolution of all these words from Latin into different Roman languages, you will probably realize something. You have Latin words such as filum, facere, farina, formica, ferrum, with the translation in English here. And you probably realize something. Do you see anything? No? I'm sure you have noticed that all of these words keep the letter F at the beginning of the word, as in Latin, except in the case of Spanish. This different evolution has been explained by the influence of pre-Roman languages in contact with Latin. All these languages, Basque and Iberian and pre-Roman language, may not have had this sound F, this labiodensal fricative sound. So the speakers of these languages pronounce these Latin words by replacing the F with an aspirated sound, no? Harina, instead of farina. No? This sound came to be represented by an H, and later on the aspiration disappeared, although its remembrance remains in this letter. Other examples of this underlying influence of the pre-Roman languages are the reductions to 5 vowels that we have in Spanish, as well as the confluence of B and V in just one sound. So in Spanish, we say Barcelona and Valencia is the same sound, no? While in some other Roman languages and have maintained the difference between V and V as the difference you have in English. So the particular evolution of Latin in this area of Romania, in the peninsula, is explained by this underlying influence of pre-Roman languages, and explain also some features of Spanish. Of course, we have also the influence of these pre-Roman languages in vocabularies. We have many words here: barro, muñeca, manteca, perro, and the words from Basque: chatarra, mochila, zurrón, chamarra, izquierda, no, for left, that have been brought from Basque language. No, Basque is the only pre-Roman language that has survived, and it was spoken in a wider area. Today, rather more restricted. This area has been always bilingual, so in the same way that it has given many words to Spanish, it has also borrowed a great many from the Latin stock. No? Even some of the words that we perceive today as very, very Basque, for example, agur, which is the expression to say hello and goodbye, agur, is not Basque. It comes from a Latin word, the Latin augurio. Okay, after the fall of the Roman Empire, a series of waves from the north, from Germanic peoples, the Suevi, the Vandals, the Alans, arrived on the peninsula, so that in Spain we could have ended up speaking a Germanic language. However, that was not the case, because the Latin language had already taken root, and the new invaders did not claim or impose their languages. They were unwritten or barely written, and had a very weak cultural tradition. And so Latin offered more possibilities for the new comers. No? The direct influence of these Germanic languages on Spanish is very limited, about 100 words or so. But I have put some of these words, and I'm sure you can find correlate in English, because these words have a Germanic root, no? Espía, spy, guerra, war, or casta, cast. There are also more Germanic traces in first names, that now are perceived as traditional Spanish, but they are Germanic, no? And names such as Álvaro, Rodrigo, Gonzalo, Alfonso, Adolfo, Elvira, etc., etc. Right. For several centuries after the fall of the Roman Empire, the teaching and the written language was confined to the monasteries, to the church, and the oral language began to break up, splitting into different languages, which is how the Romance languages were born. This period of fragmentation of the popular Latin languages took place between the 4th and the 10th centuries. To what extent these languages were at the beginning unintelligible, were spoken together, is very difficult to say. Probably the languages of one place were understandable to the neighbors, and those of the neighbors to those beyond, and so on, forming a chain which at a given moment could no longer guarantee intercomprehension between two peoples who were not in direct contact with each other. No? That is now with the concept of complex language. Each region gradually endowed the spoken language with its own features, distancing itself from the common core, without this difference being transferred to the written language, because the written language was still Latin. There were also aspects of change that are common to several Roman languages. For example, a general Roman creation is a sound palatal nasal, no? Ñ, no? Represented as ñ in Spanish, gn in French, nh in Portuguese, ny in Catalan, no? Words like señor, España, ungula, or anu gave this palatal nasal sound, señor, España, uña, caña, no? It is to this latter origin, to the double N, that it owes its current spelling in Spanish, as NS was usually abbreviated to N with a tilde, with this little sign on the end, no, superimposed, no. Hence, ñ, already used in the 13th century, together with double N for the palatal nasal of any origin. Okay, let's continue this journey throughout the history towards Spanish by talking about something that we have already mentioned before, the relationship between Spanish and Arabic. The expansion of Arabic from east to east started before the arrival of the Arabs to the peninsula, which happened in 711, where they crossed the Straits of Gibraltar and spread without much resistance throughout the Hispanic Visigothic kingdom. This was the beginning of a long and discontinuous war to recover the primitive borders, which would not come to an end until 1492. The Neo-Latin languages formed during that period of Muslim presence were impregnated with Arabic terms for everyday objects and place names. So you will find many place names in Spain with this origin. After the arrival of the Arabs, a large part of the Hispanic Gothic population remained in their places of origin. And if we bear in mind that the newcomers were very few numbers, until 756, only about 60,000 men, compared to a peninsular population of 4 million, it is easy to understand why the Romance language survived in Al-Andalus, which is the name for the Islamic Spain. Moreover, although 8 centuries elapsed between these two dates, 711 to 1492, they were not 8 centuries of absolute Islamic predominance, since in 1212, after the battles of Navas de Tolosa, most of the peninsular territory passed under the dominion of the Christian kingdoms. The coexistence of these very different languages meant that the influence only reached the most external aspects, which is the vocabulary. You know? The influence of the Arabic on the Spanish lexicon is, as we have already indicated, very remarkable. You can find words of Arabic in many different fields in Spanish: the house, the city, plants and fruits, flowers, food, trade and crafts, clothing, etc., etc. Many of these words came also into other European languages. In some of the words, the annexation, in many of the words, the annexation of the Arabic article al is inherited in the Spanish version, and this is characteristic of Spanish and does not occur in the Arabisms that appear in other European languages such as French, English, or Italian. No? In some cases, these borrowings jumped directly from Arabic into European languages, but in other cases, Spanish acted as a bridge. In other words, there are Arabisms that were incorporated into the respective language from Spanish, and in these cases, they are usually preceded by the article al or a. This is the case, for example, of alcohol in English, which comes, it's a borrowing existing in English and French, and it entered through the Andalusian Arabic. The word azúcar, for example, which is sugar in English, sucre in French, and zucchero in Italian, no? All of them derive from the same Arabic root, sucar, but none of them has the a that in Spanish we trace the annexation of the article. Let's go to a picture of the 10th century, sorry. Different languages coexisted on the linguistic borders of Castile in the south, Arabic together with Andalusian Romance, which was known as Mozarabic. In the east, Riojan, Aragonese, Navarrese variety, and Basque, of course. In the west, Asturian and Leonese varieties, and in addition, the Hebrew, of the Jews. At this point, it is necessary to mention a series of facts that determine that Castilian prevailed over the other languages and varieties of the peninsula. One of these milestones was the period of the King Alfonso X, who decided to opt for Castilian rather than Latin as the language for the laws and also for literary production. This fact favored the spread of Castilian throughout the kingdom and elevated it to the rank of official language to the detriment of Latin. To achieve this, the King Alfonso X set the first orthographic standards, and he opted for spelling close to the sound. These early orthographic rules, basically maintained until the 18th century, are a clearly modern aspect of Spanish in comparison to other languages, which maintained a more etymological, let's say, less transparent spelling. Centuries later, there was another definitive event in the history of Spanish. In 1479, two young people aged 18 and 17, very young, married in Valladolid. Their names, Isabel and Fernando. They were the heads to the crowns of Castile and Aragon, and with them, the former kingdoms were merged into one. They will be known as the Reyes Católicos, Catholic monarchs, and Castilian, the language of Queen Isabel, became the common language. It was at this time that the term Español, Spanish, came into use, a term in which those who were part of the new extended kingdom but were not from Castile recognized themselves. No? Both the members of the old kingdom from León and Andalusia and the new Spaniards coming from Aragon, Valencia, Navarra prefer the most comprehensive term of Spanish instead of Castilian, no? A term which started to be used to refer the language in which all Spaniards could communicate with each other. During the following centuries, the 16th century to the 18th century, Spanish became one of the great languages of culture in the modern world, the golden age of Spanish literature, with authors such as Boscán, Garcilaso, Lazarillo de Tormes, Santa Teresa, San Juan, Góngora, Quevedo, Lope, Cervantes, of course. And Spanish also became an object of study in itself. Of all the Romance languages, it was the first to have a grammar, no? And that has been only the case for Latin, no? In 1492, the first Gramática de la Lengua Castellana, grammar of the Castilian, was published by Eddie Antonio de Nebrija. It was also during the time of the Reyes Católicos, the Catholic monarchs, that the most historically significant expansion took place. the arrival of the Spanish language to the Americas, as we have already indicated. This process had its prologue in the occupation of the Canary Islands, which were discovered at the end of the 14th century, initially dominated by Portugal, but soon incorporated to the Castilian crown between 1479 and 1496. The conquest and colonization were the rehearsal for what was to happen later on the other side of the ocean. And as it will happen in America, the Spanish brought to the Canaries was mainly the Andalusian variety. In fact, the majority of the first immigrants to America were Andalusians. No? From 1492 to 1508, the percentage of Andalusian was around 60%. And we have also to bear in mind that Sevilla was a port of embark for America for many travelers from other places. So this is why the Andalusian linguistic habit of ceseo, the same pronunciation of C and S, was exported to the America, and that explains why the vast majority of Spanish speakers pronounce today these two sounds as the same one. The colonization of America meant also that many of the native languages disappeared, almost all those of the Caribbean, and only those of the most developed Indian communities survived, encouraged by the missionaries in their evangelizing work. The most important contribution of the Amerindian languages to Spanish is lexical, referring especially to the new realities of that word. Sorry. You have here some of the American words. Maybe canoa. Canoa is considered the first word brought from America into European languages. The word appears in the Diario de Colón. As you know, he arrived to America on the 12th of October, 1492. And one day later, in his diary, Columbus mentions that the Almadías, which was a word from Arabic origin, but was the word that was used to speak about a boat, no, a small boat, no. Columbus mentions that the almadías used by the natives are called canoas, no. After that, in the Diario de Colón, the use of word almadía, the Spanish almadía, although it has an Arabic origin, declines, and the word canoa becomes more frequent to the point of being absolutely imposed in the rest of the diary. From Spanish, canoa has passed into all Western languages. In Italian, we have canoa or canotto. In French, canot. In English, canoe. In German, canoe. There are many other American words that have passed to the European languages through Spanish, and now they are used as international words. Now you have some words in Spanish here, and I'm sure you easily find the correlate in English: huracán, barbacoa, caníbal, chocolate, patata, citron. The influence of Amerindian languages on Spanish hardly existed at the level of sounds and grammar, and it was more restricted, as it was the case in Arabic, to the lexicon. In the 18th century, at the beginning of the 18th century, in 1713, the Royal Spanish Academy was founded. It was similar to what had happened just before in France and Italy, and this was a means of unifying the language and giving it norms, something that had already occurred in France and Italy. In this century, the Royal Spanish Academy published the Diccionario de Autoridades and the Gramática. New norms and new rules were needed because there had been a series of changes in the sound level that had moved the writing away from pronunciation and produced certain hesitations in the graphic system. From the outset, the Royal Academy combined an etymological approach and attention to habitual phonic usage when deciding on the spelling of words. So we have, for example, the etymological criteria that it was used to establish the written use of B and V, where it was at that time it was usually to have hesitations, no? So they decided to do it according to the Latin etymos. So bueno, amaba, vos, vivir, considering how it was written in Latin. although, as we have seen, both represented at that time the same sound in Spanish. It was also an etymologist approach, the restoring of the H in Latin words with the initial H, hoy, hombre, or in Latin words with the initial F, hijo. No? Remember that aspirated sound that it didn't exist anymore. On the other hand, the Royal Academy adopted a simplifying approach when banishing the C cedil, for example, or the double S, or the groups such as PH, TH, CH from classical Greek words such as philosophia, teatro, or Christo that were eliminated, no, for a simplification of this group of letters. No? Except for minor changes, we could say that the orthography of present-day Spanish was definitely established, and it can be defined as a graphic system with a high correspondence with the sound level. No? That is something that differs from, for example, from what happens in French system and in French orthography. 18th century was also an age where we had a look at the past, at the classical past, and the introduction of cultisms, no, the words from classical Latin and classical Greek, multiplied for the development of technical and scientific language. You have many words that are used in English here, technical and scientific, that has a almost identical correlate in Spanish. So that means that we share a very large part of this vocabulary, making it easier to approach technical and scientific language, and text. The 18th and 19th century were also the great age of French culture. That is why lots of words coming from French into Spanish and other European languages. This is an area also, another area of lexical convergence with other European languages as English, which also received borrowings of French origin. You have many words coming from French that we have in either in Spanish and in English. No, pantalón, chaqueta, chal, champán, restaurante, hotel, croqueta, parquet, garaje, menú, chalet, chofer, crema, debut, plataforma, sofá, etc. In terms of English words also started to enter Spanish during Romanticism, but since then its progress has been unstoppable. No? Among the oldest are club, dandy, snob, vagón. Many have been integrated more or less quickly. Tranvía, yate, bote, names of sports such as football, tennis, baseball, boxeo, objects like panfleto, revolver, shampoo, clothes as jersey, sweater, or social activities like turismo, líder. Also, you see that they have been adapted to the Spanish graphic system. However, where the influence of English appears most strongly, it is in the semantic contagion of many pre-existing Spanish terms with great speed through the media. No? This change can affect words that are similar in English and Spanish, like, for example, the one you have here, asumir, in the sense of assume, acceptar, no? Accept. Editor in the sense of director. Eventual in the sense that something that happens, no? Firma in the sense of company. Romance in the sense, or romance in the sense of love affair, no? On other occasions, the semantic Anglicism is the result of the translation of English words. So estrella for notable actor or actress, rascacielos, which is the literal translation of skyscraper. That is the case also of basketball, baloncesto. And other groups of words are the literal translation of English collocations. No? Science fiction is ciencia ficción, Guerra Fría for Cold War, mesa redonda for round table, o perrito caliente for hot dog. Today, more than 800 million people around the world speak Latin, or it's not Latin, but it's the same as saying a language inherited from Latin. Most of them are non-European, they're in America, and more than half of them, 499 million, have Spanish as their main language. The Neo-Latin language family is united by obvious common features. For example, male and female gender of nouns, and the requirements to choose the appropriate form of the adjective in the combination with a noun. Also, the verb inflection, the requirements of subject-verb combination. The use of cases has disappeared in the majority of our Roman languages. Many prepositions are also the same, so the Latin supra, contra, ad, ante, inter, de have equivalents in almost all Roman languages. The most obvious similarity lies in the words where the common origin is unmistakable. It is estimated that 60 to 80% of the lexicon is made up of words that have been in continuous use since Roman times. A large part of the neologisms have been re-inspired by Latin or the Romanesque heritage. With such large overlaps, anyone familiar with either language will have a little difficulty recognizing at least half of the common words of the other. In Spanish and Portuguese, for example, up to 90% of the basic vocabulary can coincide. Italian, as is what we can call a cultural language, can have around 80% overlap with most of the others. Consequently, there is a large degree of mutual intelligibility, or at least an ease of overcoming linguistic barriers at a certain cultural level. In this brief overview through the history of Spanish, we have seen that it has been in contact with different languages and cultures that have shaped the actual Spanish. No? Thanks to this contact and influences, Spanish today shares a lexical heritage with many other European languages, including English, which makes it easier to learn. Here you have in this slide some useful references in case you would like to go beyond now a little bit further on the history of Spanish. No? These 4 books: Historia de las lenguas hispánicas contada para incrédulos, El español a través de los tiempos, Anatomía de la lengua, and La maravillosa historia del español. And that's it. That's the end of my presentation. As promised, I have it has taken a little bit more of 40 minutes. As I said at the beginning, the session has been recorded, so you will be able to view it again if you want so. If you want a copy of these slides, you can download it if you are watching the session live. You can go to resources on the top or the bottom bar and then select documents, where you will have the downloadable slides. But if you are watching this session recorded and you want a copy of this, you can write us to this email us if you want a copy, and we will send it to you. I am very grateful for your patience. I let you hear our contact, our website, our channels in social media, and do not hesitate to contact us if you think that we may help you with any initiative concerning the promotion and the support of Spanish. We are here for that, no? The Spanish Embassy Education Office, the Consejería de Educación. So thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of the language show, and hasta la vista.